Hello everyone, my name is Richard Miller and welcome to Never Not Here. And at one time we thought everything is out in California, it's all, California are the only people that have open minds. And we've been in a lot of countries and around the States a lot, and we found pockets of awakening or pockets of clarity. And sometimes we're thinking that that's what our goal is to show that something is happening all around and even near you. And but still, even speaking of California, there's a lot of things going on that we're not aware of and that maybe have been going on for years. And so then we want to discover whatever we can. And I got a few ideas how I want to start, but maybe the best thing is just to say welcome to Premodaya. So hello, Premodaya. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
It's so easy to get into explanations, and because that we're all in a way hooked into trying to say something and trying to communicate. And that's a good question. Can we communicate? Because so many times we say those guys didn't get me, and maybe it's just that everybody can only get what they're ready to get. And I would have to agree with that. I don't think that's a pitiful state. That's really the ground of where we're at. People are prepared to understand certain experiences, and then other things they take as an explanation or a interpretation or a concept. And that's the miracle of trying to point to something that really can't be grasped by a concept. And we can say that a lot, and we can dismiss the words that we're trying to use and saying they're never going to do their job. But I think they can be honed.
Very well put. And, listening to you say that way, it makes me. But the thought that comes to mind is it's a challenge. The whole idea of what are you ready to get? That's the divine challenge. What are you ready to get? And are you ready to get more? Are you ready to transform? Are you ready to try a different way or to understand in a deeper way so that you can actually get more? So to me, it's not about communicating anything, but obviously all we have is words. And words are problematic, and words have a lot of associations for people, but it's the medium we have. It's the ancient medium and it's the modern medium, and you have to use words. There's no other way. But the words are an excuse to be together and see what can happen in the silence between the words.
Right, of course. But in a way, the words are what's floating on top, right? So that's the kind of the scum or something that's on top of the water, right? Or the flower petals or whatever they are, but the water's still there. And so then
everything. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, then there's maybe the key is the depth of the water is like I see you rightly. I see you rightly, and I feel you with my heart, and somehow that seeing and feeling, I see you in how I see the world, and that's maybe of much more value than the words I put to it, or hopefully my words will get better and better.
Well, the feeling is what tells you. The feeling is what, informs you. What's in your heart is the message that tells you whether it's real or not, whether it's the right direction or not. And people get more sensitive and better at trusting that.
Well, I tend to totally agree that it tells you what direction to go. But I'm not so sure if it tells you it's real or not. Because in a way,
Well, cumulatively it does.
Yeah.
It does. It's not all there is, but over time the data accumulates. You have different experiences, certain things happen that can't be explained, different feelings occur, and you put all that together, and my way of looking at things is if you're smart, you'll come to a conclusion at some point that something real is going on.
Yeah.
People all the time avoid making that conclusion. They want to kind of have a foot in both camps. They want to trust the material and trust the spiritual at the same time. But sooner or later, you've got to put your bet down that the spiritual life is the real life.
Wouldn't it be great? It's like if you're not smart, you know, the zonk on the head would be so hard, and then that would be a really good pointing because I'd get the non-smarties too.
Well, that's what happened to me. That's what happened to me. It was just a total crush. All of a sudden, what they call a bolt out of the blue. And when I say smart, I don't mean your IQ. I just mean smart enough to look at the facts and accept the facts as they are.
Right, that takes a certain kind of a focus, you know, or a certain kind of a defocus, because, you know, if we're always focused on another way, the way we're used to, what is it? Now, let me just ask you this question, like, what is it about a human that somehow, is it just the mental apparatus, or is it just the languaging? Why does it seem so linear that we can only concentrate or focus on one thing at a time?
I have no idea, but I think it's my answer to everything about what is it about humans is we're all nuts. and until we start to shed that nutsness, until we start to focus on what matters, which means the divine, which means the real spiritual, then we're kind of going around in circles, or maybe it's the right direction for a while, but it changes. But the only thing, in my way of speaking, the only thing you can count on is the spiritual reality. And the more you move toward that, the more you're accepting of that, the more you adjust yourself to reality, the less crazy you're going to be. Some of your craziness is going to start dropping away. And then something becomes more and more possible.
So we're all nuts, and we're all focusing on the wrong thing. We're looking in all the wrong places. And so then those wrong places, those are more like, you know, how we interpret what's happening.
Well, we're all deluded. We're all driven by our desires, by our urges, by our history, by our conditionings, you know, a long list of things that grabs our attention and motivates us until that day, whether it's gradual or sudden, that we start to be motivated for real by something higher, something divine, something that is of the truly spiritual. And then either slowly or quickly, we start to focus in that direction. And as you go, it's my experience and my observation that as you go, the rest kind of gets shed over time, and you develop a whole different focus.
In a way, what you're saying,
and that's grace.
Yeah. In a way, what you're saying is you get motivated by something higher, right? But if I understand that right, it's still a desire. So then, what about, you know, the desire is always
still a desire. It's still a desire until you surrender to it. Once you surrender to it, then, I mean, you can say it's still a desire, but it's the highest desire, so it's positive. It takes you somewhere. Once you surrender to it, it flips. In other words, instead of you having the desire, now the divine has you. And then it's just an endless process of living it more and surrendering it to it even more, which is just a joy. Doesn't mean there aren't problems. It doesn't mean there aren't anxieties, issues, everything else, all the problems of life. But it does mean you have reached a point of being free of doubt. It does mean the certainty is clear because you know it. You know it at the deepest level that this is real. This is what it's all about. Going Godward isn't an idea. It's a living reality. And that's always wonderful. That's my joy, is to see people moving that way.
Sometimes I try to simplify. So then we listed a lot of things. I don't know if I remember them all, but I mean, they were something like about our fears and our desires and our confusions and our anxieties and, you know, our perplexities and our trying to get it right. But basically all of that can kind of just be noted that we feel we're not whole or we're not complete or something's missing, in other words, and we're trying to, and we've given the orders to one of our best tools, which is like our mental apparatus. We've given the order to go find me a way out of this maze, find me a way out of this forest. You know, I'm incomplete. I need something, and so then it comes up with a lot of desires, and you know, it can start with material desires and move to spiritual desires, but it's still trying to do a patchwork on neediness. And if you could just exactly examine neediness. I mean, so many say, like, well, look right here, right now. Are you needy now? And then, you know, that's one way to start. I don't know. I mean.
But we all start very needy. There's no question about it. And To me, neediness is not so much the issue as can you see how needy you are. And the thing that's related to that, which is probably one of the things I speak about, I found myself speaking about the most because it just comes up in response to what people bring up, is the whole idea of control, the whole idea that you can control things. And people, especially I think in our culture, in our time, have this unspoken idea or maybe even unconscious idea that life is about controlling as much as you can and getting things to come out right for you, getting, kind of keeping out the pain and bringing as much good stuff towards you as possible. So, but all of that, your word's a good word, all of that is based on a kind of a broad neediness. And you can't attack this head on. You can't deal with the neediness head on because there's no way to eradicate it. The only thing is it gets replaced by the divine understanding, let's say. The real antidote is understanding. The more you understand based on your own actual experience about what's going on and about what's possible for you, and the more your experience changes toward what's real, the more you start giving up the need to control. And that's what actually makes you feel less needy and live in a less needy way. And you start to actually accept reality on reality's terms, and that's the requirement, that you accept reality on reality's terms. I think most people are living with the unconscious notion that they need to bend reality to how they want it to be. Well, that's never going to work.
Well, is neediness in that reality? Because you talked about reality. Maybe I doubt if we can define it, but we can walk around it a few times and look at it from some different angles. But I don't know if I'm pressing neediness too much, but it just means like not whole. I believe I'm not whole, and you could start to make some basic distinctions and say a man needs food and clothing and shelter and stuff like that. And then of course you can go in your fridge, it's full. You can go in your closet, it's full. You can say companionship. Oh, there comes my wife home from work. So all those needs are fulfilled. So at least for this minute, you could just let go of all those things and see what's left over. And then maybe that's where, I don't know, that's not really another desire. That's experimenting without a desire. That's not a desire for the highest, but if you just look and see what's left over, many people say that the highest is not really the highest, it's the lowest. It's like the ground we're living on. It's always here, because if you say it's the ultimate, then you think I got to scramble, I got to climb, I got to get there. If you just say reality is what's here before your neediness, instead of after it's all complete, before you even thought of neediness,
well put.
It would be simpler. It would be simpler, right? It would just be like relax or just be here or like.
Yeah. Yes. No, I couldn't agree more. That's the point. And whatever gets you there is the right direction. Whatever gets you there, whatever helps you to get to that point is what has to happen. So there's nothing wrong with any of it. There's nothing wrong with the neediness. There's nothing wrong with the desires. That's how things are. That's the nature of things. That's the nature of how we are. But the point is, are you starting to, and you use the right word, experiment and observe? If you are observing life closely, and this is what people often don't do, and this is what I find myself encouraging people to do. Start to observe very closely how life, which means your life, because that's the one you're going to care about, that's the one that's going to impact how you think and how you see things. If you start to observe it really closely and objectively, soberly, how does this really work, instead of living like most of us do from our ideas about how life works or what we've been taught about how life works.
Say more about objectively, when you say objectively, say a little bit more about that. Like what is how do you know you're objective?
You know you're objective when you don't like what you're seeing.
That's a beauty.
because it's not going to be good news in the beginning. In the beginning, you're going to see that things aren't the way you thought they were. Some of your delusions are going to get pierced. You're going to see that not only aren't things the way you thought they were, but they aren't the way you hope they'll be. And the more you accept that reality, the more it gets clear to you that there is something very, very real going on. That reality is. and that it's your job, your responsibility, and in fact, all you can do is adjust yourself to that as much as you can, more and more, in every way possible, and then things start to make sense in a certain way. Then things start to, the pieces of the puzzle start to come together, and you're not so lost in concepts, you're not so lost in hopes and desires. You start to move toward reality for real, and reality is challenging. Reality is dangerous. So you have to have support, and you're usually not going to get it from worldly sources, because it's not what the conventional and what the societal supports. So that's the essence, if you ask me, of the spiritual path, that you're accepting a non-conventional road, and that you're in it for the duration. You're made up your mind that you're going all the way. You have to have that persistence, or else you're not going to have the strength to go all the way, the motivation. So, but it's kind of, you get happier as you go. So.
Okay, because there's, you can come up with a few examples where people didn't have the strength, and mostly they're like approaching death when there's not even an ounce of strength left. And then somehow you realize, hey, I don't even need strength. It's true that some people right on death kind of like have even near death, or people that come back.
I think it's very frequent. Very
right?
frequent.
And so then in that case, you don't need a lot of energy, and you don't need a lot of sureness and goals and intention and stuff like that. You're just in fact,
ultimately it's willingness. Whether it's slowly throughout your lifetime or in your last moments, it's always a question of willingness.
Yeah. And then a lot of stories, well, even of modern day masters, but you had it in one way that was a bolt of lightning, but others have worked for years and years and years, whatever they're doing. Let's say they're in the Buddhist tradition, and they get up at 4 in the morning and meditate till midnight, and they do that whenever they're off work or whatever, And then finally they just say, oh, God, I can't do this, and hell with it all, And then that's when something floods in, when they just drop that idea that they're doing it, that they're going to do it, that they're going to force it through.
But I believe that's because they're prepared. They did the sadhana.
Yeah. And I just hear the story. I'm not testifying to that. I'm just recounting a story.
Yeah, but it's a common story, and my belief is, my understanding of it is, that they took the sadhana as far as they could, and that developed them. That made them fertile. That made them ready. That when they did let go, when they did drop everything, when they did actually stop, as they say in the in the Ramana tradition, when they actually stopped, they were truly exhausted. They truly had exhausted themselves. They truly had put their 100% effort into it. And until you've put 100% in, you can't get 100% back. So people want to do a 99% effort with great, very sincere people want to do 99%, and I'm always telling people, if it isn't 100%, you're lowering your chances. So always give it your best. Always give everything.
The old,
if you want
the old
God,
total rap, right? Divine, be total, right?
Yeah. If you want God, if you want the divine, if you want reality, why would you expect that the price is less than 100%? If you want the most that can be gotten, if you want the best there is, the price is going to be high. It's going to be all of you.
Okay, well, these are all like, okay, this is how I take it, that these are all just metaphors, of course, because like God is not a transaction, and so then there's no price. Or, there's no price dear enough, and there's no price at all, But I mean, they're metaphors, and apparently, a lot of our pointing is in a metaphor, and sometimes working really hard. Well, it keeps you.
I wouldn't want people to take it as metaphors. I would want people to take it very seriously, to take it literally.
Yeah, but God is not a transaction, is he?
You've got to do a lot of transactions in yourself to get more clear and to have a chance of getting to God. Absolutely. You've got to transform. You can't just expect to be handed something. The onus is on your side. So the more you take it as it's all symbolic and it's all a metaphor, and the more that suggests to the human mind, I don't have to do anything, that would not be I would not encourage that. I would encourage that you need to really, really be sincere. You need to really be willing, and there is a price of admission, and you have to be willing to pay it. Whether that's doing the practice, the sadhana, whether that's changing how you think, whether that's dropping a certain set of beliefs, whether that's deciding that you have to be a kinder person in general. You know, it can be anything, but something has to change. You can't just sit where you are and expect it to fly into the room or come knocking on your door. So,
you know, I totally agree with sincere. You know, you got to be sincere, and however,
and you got to want it.
Yeah,
you got to really want it.
Well, want usually steers our attention, because like desire is our interest is what steers our attention. So then, if we're interested in freedom, our attention will fall on what's happening within us that's not free. And so then that certainly steers, it seems to, and not 100%, of course, because our attention can go anywhere. It can go off wandering. But I mean, yeah, I agree with that.
Well, going back to my basic statement that we're all nuts, at some point, you're going to have help, whether it's through grace, whether it's through a teacher, whether it's through, you know, a certain set of practices, whether it's through a religion. At some point, the first statement is it's really all up to you. And the second statement is, if you're sincere and you're willing and you really try to go forward, the help will come in whatever form. So it's not a solo thing. And then you have to be willing to accept the help from whatever direction it comes, in whatever form it comes. But you have to understand, Richard, that my work is all about working very intimately, directly with individuals, with people. I'm not propounding a certain philosophy, although one seems to arise in talking, but and I'm certainly an advaitist in every way. But you know, my mission, my work is to work with individuals. So when you work with individuals, and you know, I've been working with people for 33 years, but spiritually, specifically spiritually, we're in our 8th year. So people need that encouragement to actually do something, because we're all deluded, we're all nuts, and it's very easy to put our habits and our conditionings into new bottles and say, well, now I've arrived. And I watch people do this all the time. So you've got to help people to actually go forward for real. And that's why I say, at least to me, it isn't metaphorical, because they actually have to do things. They actually have to be active in their own spiritual growth. And, you know, the teacher, the master can't hand it to you. You have to garner it.
That's definite, right? But yeah, okay, you're saying they have to do things, but in a way they have to, and
do things
once before.
Let
me just recall another thing you said, that we can't just sit and do nothing, you know, and which in a way means like it does mean still doing what we've always done, right? And what we might want to say is you can't do what you've always done, you know, which is just like drift. You can't be a drifter. You somehow have to change your focus and see and look at what's happening without your interpretations. And how you do that somehow is you have to soften on your belief structure. I believe. I don't know. How do you like that one?
I love it. I love that word, soften. But I think the onus is even much more. You have to get rid of your whole belief structure. Softening it is great, and if you can just toss it out the window, that's even better.
Oh, yeah.
because reality doesn't care what you believe. God isn't an idea.
It might be hard to toss out all at once. That's why I say soften it, let it dissolve, let a piece flake off. I don't think this is necessary. I don't think this is necessary.
Soften is a beautiful concept. Soften is a beautiful concept. And whatever it is, it's never a mistake to soften more.
Yeah.
With anything.
Right.
I love that.
Soften your heart too, right? I mean, soften your heart, soften your intellect, soften your explanations,
That's what I love about you. You're a softener.
I'm a softie or a softener?
Both.
I
Both.
pound it
You're
up.
you have a wonderful softness that's very enjoyable. I think that's why you do well, and people wanna listen to you.
Some like it, and some aren't so sure. I'll admit.
Well, that's because they're still deluded. Everybody has their own misperception.
One guy's just been writing me and said, if you'd only shut up, I would love your shows. I think it's cool, and I says, well, everybody's not as clear as you, I want to always bring it back to the foundation. And then the last thing I wrote him, we'll see what happens. I told him we got this thing called open microphone, and I would like to bring you on so that you could, clarify things for people. Because that would be a real service to the guy, that he could listen to himself, and then who knows, maybe he is real sharp. I'd be willing.
Yeah. Obviously that's your enthusiasm too, and he may be, it may be hurting his ego. He may be misinterpreting your enthusiasm as something else.
No, I wander around a lot and get lost, and he probably gets lost in his head too and hates it, and then he hates anyone to do that, right? I don't know. I would think that, because I get confused and kind of ramble and stuff like that, and here's a place where I want to go.
But you're so sweet.
Oh yeah, that's good.
It's not a problem.
That's the good part. Okay, now here's one. Now check this out, because you said in a way well, I'm a kind of an Advaitist to the core, or something like that, or in other words, you see this, the non-duality part. You kind of have deconstructed it and kind of understand what it's all about, and has a meaning to you, a direct meaning. Let's say, not even a meaning.
There is no doubt for me that there's only one here. That's it. All is one. There is nothing else. I don't have any doubts about it. I know it for sure. Yeah.
So anyhow, then oftentimes we say, well, that, probably saying that to somebody doesn't really help them see it, In other words, maybe that's best left as their discovery. And then, so anyhow, where I want to go with that is kind of so the Advaitists kind of are really looking at how we think and how we construct abstractions, and saying, well, all these abstractions, they're overlaid on whatever's here now. And we can then pull it back and say it used to be this way, and there's a pattern that got us here, and then we can push it forward and say, look, at that same pattern is going to be in vigor tomorrow and the next day, and so then we're going to end up here, oh gosh. And then, Advaitists or non-duality tends to say, well, look, that's a thought. Those are words. Basically, words are no more than a sound. When you think about it, how did humans get these sounds? And humans must have gave them the meaning. You could say God just gave us languages and dictionaries, but in the meantime, you could say that, even now things are being, words are changing. So there's an evolution in the vocabulary even now. So then why not say that, one guy said that the primitive man had one word, the first word, and then two, and then 3 or 4, and then he had one thought a week, and then somehow...
Well, the first word was gimme.
Gimme, huh? Right on. It was probably just you or me, one of those two, But anyhow, he was probably just taken. Anyhow, I don't know. I never had kids, so I don't know how the gimme starts, Their hands are out, and their lips automatically suckle. But, so anyhow, what I'm saying is that... we kind of give words a bad rap, and therefore we don't really try to hone them very much in non-duality. And when we're talking about reality, because a lot of parts of life, people say when you verbalize something, there's some kind of new understanding or new creation that happens within you. And can we verbalize, and I guess that's my, it's abstract, but in a way, can we verbalize this reality that we see, or is it just all spaciousness and the reality is it's got no words to go with it?
We can absolutely verbalize it, but it has to be with the understanding that it's bigger than that it's something you experience, not something you say. So words are wonderful. Words are a great God-given gift, the fact that we can talk in such complicated ways and with so many nuances and say so much with words is, there's no end to how wonderful it is. But reality is way bigger than that. Reality is way more wonderful than that. Words is just one little aspect of this reality, one little aspect that humans have a great gift in. But sooner or later, you have to recognize what's bigger. Sooner or later, you have to recognize that the wordless is what matters. So, when I first started to speak publicly, one of the things I heard myself say, and it became one of my favorite quotable quotes, was the known is a tiny little subset of the unknown. And words are language is a tiny little subset of the known. So we're talking about, language is gigantic. The fact that we can communicate with words in the way we can is just immense. And that is a pinpoint in the middle of a million oceans compared to what's actually going on. So we just have to have the understanding through experience that that's part of reality. That's not a big chunk of reality. It's a small piece of what's going on, not the essence, not the forefront of what's going on.
Well, in a way, I'll hit it one more time then, just as saying when we verbalize something, we can verbalize something about ourselves and all of a sudden it'll become clear. But before we verbalize that, we're kind of it's down, let's call it we're not noticing it. And so then it's still operating, but it's kind of like controlling us, and that's what we're kind of referring to when we're referring to conditioning and stuff. It's those things that are kind of controlling us, but we're not noticing. So then not notice just means it's not in our conscious, so then we could just call it unconscious. In other words, somehow it's something that we're not paying attention to. And once we see it and pay attention to it, that part of this vastness that you spoke about bubbles up and somehow becomes part of our known life. I don't know. It's just is that just because we put a word to it? But somehow, we can even release things that seem to be making us feel bad. And by somehow putting it on. That's what I do, I guess, in Never Not Here. I put things on the table, right, and just use the word format. But again, I say, everything else is working. The words are floating on top of the water. That's what we're seeing. But still, we're still having our heart. We're still having our feelings. We're still having any kind of collective consciousness that we're floating on. All that kind of stuff is still active, just as much as it ever was. Just because we're talking, we've shifted our view to what we're saying.
Yeah, words are wonderful. I'm not against words. I'm not against ideas. I'm not against the mind. And I didn't. In fact, if you want to talk about Advaita, I didn't even know I was an Advaitist until I started speaking about it. Until I started working with people, teaching, and I heard myself saying things, and I realized, oh, well, that's Advaita. I'd read enough. But it didn't mean anything. It hadn't clicked for me. And then speaking made it click. I heard myself say things, and I realized, well, there's a name for that. That actually is a system. It's called Advaita. So I was quite shocked by that. I was quite shocked that to find out that what I already knew for sure has a name and is codified in a certain way and is considered a philosophy or a path. It was just an amazing realization that, because I thought I'd invented it.
Well, let's see now. Where do I want to go with that? Let me just think a sec, because so in a way, like words are, our languages and they tend to be the foundation of our agreements. With our fellow man, I guess. It's always with another man, And the agreements is how we build our societies, and then that's how we build our activities. And somehow this whole, our cultures and so on are all built on languages and human agreements. So then it's a vast playground. And the neat part, because you said, well, it's a big playground, but you talked about the reality is so much vaster. So then that's really cool, because our little boat made out of all this web of agreements and speech can float anywhere. It can, in this vastness, it's really not limited. It's limited by its own edges, but it can kind of morph into so many different things, and there's not really too many limits on it. So then that's exciting. And why shouldn't it morph to something that, where more people can feel happiness and can feel less stress? And why shouldn't we all kind of feel an interest in that and just say, well, I don't have any stress, so that's all I need right now. Let them work on their part.
Well, it'd be nice if more people were able to say that, wouldn't it? So, because that's the epidemic, is people think it's normal to have stress.
That's such a such a good subject, because I think it's so clear if you really look at it that is stress productive or counterproductive? Does it really help you get things done when the more you're stressed?
Well, that's the idea people have sold themselves and agreed on, and it's completely ridiculous. You can't. Stress is another. Stress always involves some feeling of anxiety. Stress is always defined as some kind of pressure. So it's the whole idea of the broadest conceptualization of it is it's like competition, and I'm for cooperation, not competition. So stress is the idea that I have to strive, and it has to be difficult, and I have to. It's not pleasant, and I'm not a believer in that. I think life is meant to be extremely pleasant.
Well, the whole paradigm of competition means like somehow there's a limited amount, and again, it just throws us right back onto our neediness, that we need stuff, and then at any one time we can verify that whatever we're talking about is limited in that one time.
Yeah.
But where does abundance come? Just look how many mosquito eggs are hatched by one mosquito, or that's an abundance. Just look at how many tomatoes come on right now. I've been trying to give tomatoes away, for weeks, and I've got refrigerator loaded. My wife says, "What's for dinner?" But please, no tomatoes.
Well, it's all just lack of inner peace. So stress is lack of inner peace. The need to compete is lack of inner peace. And inner peace is a byproduct. Inner peace isn't the goal. If inner peace is the goal, you're setting your ambitions too low. But along the way, inner peace will come if you're moving in the right direction. And then none of these are questions anymore. All these issues get settled once there's a little more peace in you, once there's a little more love in your heart, once you're a little more accepting of reality on reality's terms. So people think these are problems to be tackled, but they actually only get tackled when you change, when you become more peaceful, when you become more God-centered, when you become more willing for life to happen on life's terms, when you're not trying to control everything all the time. How can you have any even modicum of inner peace if your idea is that you should be controlling everything?
Right. So I believe,
tell me. I see that is most people's idea. It's really true. Many people come to me, and I see that they're operating from a basis. They don't really realize it. It isn't so conscious. Some of it is, but they're operating from a basis of everything needs to be controlled. And then my work with them becomes about helping them to start to give that up, to start to see how nutty that is and how impossible it is, and that it's a conditioned idea. It's a very modern idea. It doesn't go back a long time, the idea that it's your job to control everything in your life. And people think that that's the definition of a good life or a successful life, that you've gotten more and more control of everything. Now I'm richer, now I have a nicer house, now I have a better car, now I'm more spiritual, whatever it is. But that it's completely delusional.
I was thinking about that once in education. I was at a party with some teachers, and I started asking them about their A students, and thinking that they're achievers and they're greatest, and I thought, in a way they're underachievers because, okay, they're real bright, but they don't take any courses they wouldn't be sure they would get an A in. So then they're kind of like protecting their grade point, number one. And number two, they finally graduate and they got a 4.0 average, and then they have this idea, hey, I did it, man. I controlled everything, and I'm going to just go through life and control. They really get the wrong idea, and they're in a way they're set up for a real big wake-up call. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's because somebody dies or there's an accident or things that are out of control, but something comes that they can't control.
Yeah, and including just having a decent life. So,
Yeah, divorce and all that stuff, right? But I mean,
there's
that's the way they're taught, and they're the cream of the crop. They're the top achievers, and the schooling and everything else just pushes them into a belief structure that yeah, they did it.
Yeah, but we're all in that, whether we're still in school or not. There is the cultural influence, and I think we're all very influenced by that. We're all sold on the idea that it's up to us, that we have to control everything. And it's just couldn't be more not true. So, I mean, I meet people literally every day who couldn't relax for a moment if their life depended on it. And I don't remember it being that way even 20 years ago, but certainly not 40 years ago. I'm old enough to remember what it was like in a different time, and it's a shame. It's an epidemic. It's a spiritual scourge that this society has accepted the notion of stress and achievement as the hallmark, as that's what everybody has to be after, and you're kind of on the wrong road if that's not your goal. So, it's frustrating to me. I say this only because I have to work with that all the time. Because if you're coming to me for spiritual life, if you're coming to grow, if you're coming to understand more, if you're coming to learn, whatever your motivation for coming, at least 50-60% of the people who come, I have to work with them initially on just relaxing, just letting go a little bit and being able to not be so crazy, so that you can hear something, so that you can experience something, so that something can happen for you other than both your feet being caught in the rat race. You have to a little bit be willing to get out of it so that you can go somewhere real instead of being caught in all this round and round. And that's, a waste of time. I mean, if that's where somebody is, you can't start from where somebody isn't. So then that becomes the work. But then we're doing that for a week, a month, a year to get you ready to actually move in a direction that's going to make a difference for you. So that's like clearing out the garbage. But I often wish I didn't have to bother with that.
Maybe I'll take that one over for you.
Good. I'll give it to anybody.
I'll prepare some people and I'll beam them into you, and I'll just kind of strip it off, right? But anyhow, I mean, I certainly could see that, because like I used to have, I used to kind of believe that I was getting somewhere, and then the next belief that comes after that is the faster you go, the quicker you get there, right?
But did you used to be a high stress guy? Like really strong and high stress?
Well, first I was an underachiever and kind of a Dumbo kid, so then I didn't start out that way, and then somehow I made up a story that said, I work longer even though I can't do it so quick, and then somehow I made another definition that stress is actually like muscle tone, and that it keeps you from being flabby. And so then I thought, give me that stress. Give me some more of that stress, I really love it, And so with that, there's really nothing you can do. You're thinking that's good, and anyone that's not stressed is just like flaccid and just
lazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just
a
lazy.
definition that you put you make to justify what's happening in your life. And once you could see that, in other words, like, okay, I could go here, Like a lot of times when you talk about spiritual search and stuff like that, you have to say there's a lot of suffering. In other words, that people only come to this path after a crash. And we're saying right now that people that are on a roll, and just getting married and having a new fiance and having a new house and a new car and a promotion, they're probably not ready to see anything else, We're kind of saying it like that. And so do you have to crash, or can you kind of just have a balance?
No, I don't think you have to crash at all, but you have to become truly disillusioned, and that doesn't take necessarily a crash to happen. But you have to become truly disillusioned with this world, truly disillusioned with what's possible. And what that really means is you observe, you experience that you're not truly satisfied. Yeah, you found the right wife, you have wonderful kids, you have a beautiful home, you have a fantastic income. My master Osho used to say, nothing fails like success. So if you get everything, And then you notice that you're not really satisfied, that somehow it's not enough. That's the illusion, the disillusionment that I'm talking about. So it's not my observation that it has to be even a crisis, let alone a crash, for that to happen. It's often the case, but it can happen in any form. But what has to happen is simply that positive disillusionment that, this isn't enough. There's something, I can sense there's something deeper, there's something better, there's something more real, and that must be where the satisfaction is. Because it isn't in all this money, and it isn't in all these nice things, and it isn't in all these great relationships, and it isn't in the momentary satisfactions and happinesses and joys of regular life. There has to be a sense that there's an abiding, permanent, deep, immovable, real, totally 100% fulfilling satisfaction possible, and that it is only in the divine. And there's no set form that disillusion comes in. But you're right. I mean, it's an accurate statement to say most people aren't ready until some kind of crash or disillusionment has happened. But it's not a requirement. All that's required is that the disillusionment occur, that you see that everything you thought was what you should go after is never going to be enough, that it doesn't fulfill, it doesn't deliver the goods. And that just is the simple way to say that is the material life can't really satisfy.
For a part of it, you might just say that when you're full of energy, you think like, okay, I never ask anything to be permanent. And so then you can make a definition that fulfillment is to move through that cycle. Each time you move through that cycle of achievement, and then realizing that there could be something more, which is like that little seed of poison. And it's just a thought that says, hey, maybe let's not focus on the stuff that I said I wanted and the stuff that I said would fulfill me. Let's not focus on that anymore because it's already in the bag, And now we'll go out and play the game again, And then you can say, when you're young and full of energy,
that would only happen if you haven't yet gotten to the true fulfillment. Once you get to the true fulfillment, that doesn't happen anymore.
Right. So in other words, as long as you're in that definition, just as saying that's the cycle, and then maybe you can see that as long as I have energy, but I mean, anything you have to do for the rest of your life is kind of like a little bit much, right? And so then
the true fulfillment, that's what we're talking about. The true fulfillment means you don't have to do anything anymore.
Yeah.
You're fulfilled. You actually feel and know that you're fulfilled. You actually have 100% fulfillment. And there's nothing more you can do that's going to add one iota to it. So that whole game of achievement, that whole game of I'm lacking something, drops completely. I mean, the only way to be really fulfilled is to be really fulfilled. The only way to have actual satisfaction is to have true, permanent, 100% satisfaction, which only comes through a recognition of the divine. But once you're there, once the satisfaction has descended on you, once the fulfillment is actually felt and noticed, it's a permanent thing. You're done. You're done with that aspect. Your wants and desires don't hold any power for you anymore. How can they? You're 100% fulfilled. You're fulfilled in God. You're fulfilled in truth. You're fulfilled in reality. I don't care how you say it, but I guess what I'm saying is fulfillment, true fulfillment, the final fulfillment is absolutely possible. Absolutely. And it's not even a big deal, and it's not even, most people are capable of it if they'd be willing.
It's a total different context, because most of the other fulfillment that we're achieving, achievement fulfillment, is always
circular.
Is always reaching, Yeah. And reaching and reaching. It might be higher and higher, or maybe it's circle, but whatever, however you want to say it. But when people say, okay, what you're seeking is what you are, or, it's like your ground of being, or it's coming home, those things mean like when you stop everything, that's what's left over, is that fulfillment. When you stop all that other kind of reaching, and just, you can either stop in a sadness, like it all blew up and all puffed away and I lost it, or you could just stop in a meditation maybe and just feel it for a moment, that something must be here, that they keep calling home, and they keep saying it's closer than your skin, and it's closer than there's nowhere to go, and there's no place, there's no time to go there, and so then in that sense, that fulfillment is totally a different context. It's something that we can't really compare the two, can we?
Well, the whole idea of stop, I mean, stop is a method. Stop is a technique. What you're talking about is, the technique that Ramana popularized. I have not observed that it works well for everyone, or even a lot of people. It works like dynamite for some people. It's the quick path for some people. But for other people, it's never going to happen through understanding better the idea of stopping or even letting go of everything. So there have to be many ways. There have to be many methods because people are different. But whatever the method that gets you there, what you'll find when you get there is an actual, permanent, final fulfillment, and it's possible, and it's real, and it's always surprising because you just, never expected that it's real. You kind of doubted in the back of your mind that it's kind of talk and they're making it up. It's not possible that it's real and permanent. You have your good days and your bad days, but then when it actually is there, you see the good days, the bad days, the ups, the downs, the problems, the anxiety. It all happens within the context, within a deeper well of actual fundamental fulfillment that never changes. That's just a joy. You just are okay with everything. And that includes the worst. You just have a natural, you're able to really accept in a way you weren't before. And that's not possible to really accept without the test of life. You notice it through the test of life. Things happen, and you notice you've accepted it. You notice that you're still fulfilled despite that. You notice that the things that would have been unacceptable before are somehow now acceptable. So, it includes a recognition that fundamental fulfillment has happened, because I've worked with people, I've seen it in people that the fulfillment has occurred and they haven't noticed it. They haven't recognized it for what it is, and they're still going around in circles needlessly. And then it's a matter of just helping them see that you're already there, dude. Stop it.
Is that like how we started when we were saying verbalization sometimes helps us realize where we're at?
Well, there's no question. It has to, usually it has to be talked about, but it's a recognition. We went to New Zealand last year, and it was amazing. That's why we want to travel more, because we got such a lovely reception from people. And there was one gentleman that I worked with who was, I don't know, it's about 75, I think. He's been in spiritual life his whole life. And we were talking just about this. In that satsang, with that group, we were talking exactly about what you and I are talking about now. And somebody had brought up the subject of fulfillment. And I asked that man whether or not he was fulfilled. And he said later that he had never thought about it in those terms, and he's been a dedicated spiritual person and just his whole life. And everything changed for him. He stopped afterward. When we were leaving, he stopped me outside on the veranda with tears streaming down his face, and I said, "I have to tell you that everything changed for me with this satsang, because I didn't know it before. I didn't know it because I didn't think in those terms. I didn't use that word. But when we had that conversation about fulfillment, I suddenly recognized that I'm 100% fulfilled and that I have been for years. I just didn't know it. It was a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to see somebody recognize that, especially, somebody who hasn't got that much time left. And it's just amazing. It's just amazing. And he's not the first or only person I've seen who has so much already in place. So much has already happened, and it's just a matter of they don't know. They don't recognize it. And that's the help only becomes about helping them see what's already the case. I don't think that's rare at all.
Let me ask this, maybe I'm just asking for the tendency of it or something like that, but, okay, somehow we get dulled, right? In other words, we get used to what's happening, and then it kind of goes to the background. If we live in a beautiful house, we get used to it, and we just think of if we live in an ugly house, maybe we're thinking, oh, if it could only be better. And so then, in a way, like that fulfillment, part of it is just the fact that life and planet Earth and my body, I mean, and everything we see and is total miracle. And we're just kind of get used to it and dull to it and say, well, next, what else is new, you know? and that total miracle it goes way down. It's not that comes up to the top and all our anxieties go back down. It's not that switches, huh? You know what I mean?
I think so. If you have come to that point, and it's not the end point by any means, but if you have come to that point where you are really fulfilled, then that simply doesn't happen. Then the nice house, the not nice house, it doesn't matter to you in the same way. You'll still have complaints, you'll still have preferences, you'll still have everything goes on that's going to go on, but you're not in the same position anymore. So the whole idea, I agree with you 1,000% that everything gets dull eventually, that you adjust, and I believe that's because the human being is an exquisite adaptation machine. You know, you can adapt to anything almost instantly. If you really watch life and observe, you'll see that people are just adjusting almost instantly to amazing changes and differences that you wouldn't think it'd be easy to adjust to, but people do it without even realizing, just like that. You know, and the human is an adaptation machine, no question. So that's the dull. That's my understanding of the dullness you're talking about. We adapt so completely to all our circumstances, always, be they good or bad, that everything becomes boring. Everything becomes the known. Everything, the shine comes off of everything, and that's the nature of how we are. That's built in. But if the fulfillment that you're mentioning in relation to that is not the fulfillment that I'm talking about. The fulfillment I'm talking about overrides all of that and has nothing to do with circumstances and has nothing to do with any of that and doesn't cycle back whether we feel dull or not dull. It's just the base of things. You just are fulfilled. There's no other way to say it. It's so simple. There's no complicated way to say it.
I like it when you say it's the base of things. You know, you said it was the base of things, so that I like that. And
just are fulfilled.
I think that's clear. And then when you said it overrides everything, I want to say, how about it underrides everything, you know?
Sure. Even better.
Even better, isn't it? Because there's nowhere to go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I want to, having said all that, I want to make very clear that that's not the goal of spiritual life. That's one of the byproducts along the way. When you move toward reality, when you really move toward truth, when you really go for God, there are many byproducts along the way. One is inner peace, one is fundamental fulfillment, one is you become softer, kinder, gentler, you become a better person. There's all kinds of byproducts, effects from it, but those are often mistaken as the goal. Those are often mistaken as that's where you're trying to get to. And then people kind of hang out there and don't go forward. And I'm always wanting to push people to, no, you got to keep going. It's not, you haven't gotten the whole enchilada yet. You got to go to your complete potential.
So these are just signs or high signs or signs posts along the way or something like that.
Well, they're beautiful gifts. It's lovely. Isn't it wonderful to have inner peace? Isn't it tremendous to be a more loving person? Isn't it great to be truly fulfilled? But if you pitch your tent there, then you're not gonna go all the way to God. The oneness isn't gonna reach its full potential for you.
Say more about pitching your tent, because in one way I would say if you were sitting in inner peace, you would be in the perfect place for realizations to occur and flower in your life, and those realizations would take you all the way, you know, and any other kind of older desire structure probably wouldn't be necessary. I don't know. What do you think of that? And if you were just sitting in inner peace, wouldn't that be already a huge milestone? Because I like it a lot of times. I down talk anxiety and say, well, you can realize that it's totally counterproductive, and it's made solely of a story that tells you things aren't the way they should be, and so restory it. You know, just get out of that anxiety, and peace pops up, even if it's short-lived. It's there.
Yeah, we're really, I'm only talking about understanding on this subject. So when we talk about inner peace, if it's the person's idea, and if they've achieved real inner peace, if it's powerful and real and strong and abiding, and if they mistake that for, now I've achieved, now I've gotten there, this is actual God realization. Now I've gotten to the end point. I'm enlightened now. However they experience it or say it or describe it, if one of these milestones, which are actually byproducts, is mistaken for the goal itself, then the person kind of stops, and that's a shame. There's no, if you're trying to climb Mount Everest and there's 6 stations along the way, and you think you're at the top when you've gotten to the first station, you miss out on getting to the top. That's all I'm saying. So it's a question of understanding. You have to understand well enough that you haven't gotten to the mountaintop. You're just getting to some great points along the way, and you've got to keep going. So, that's where people fall, because pride comes in. As soon as you declare yourself as having achieved, you're in a state of pride, the ego is taken over, and that inner peace is now threatened. So people have to understand kind of where they're at. And that's where the job of the teacher, the master, becomes very helpful, because frequently I'm just confirming for people, yes, this is real, and no, you're kind of deluding yourself. So.
You were saying that we're an adaptation machine, and it's very easy to dull, In fact, we're assured to dull, But I mean,
absolutely.
Maybe that's like that's the mental apparatus that wants to move on and say next, and put that in the background, and let's look forward and see, because I want to do something, and so let's make a plan and go do some more stuff. And in fact, to our mind, just sitting in this room here is pretty dull. There's nothing more dull than presence to the mind, right? And that is the dullness mechanism I was going to suggest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but if you're at a point where at least a few beginning byproducts have occurred, you have a little more inner peace, you have a little more willingness, you have a little more surrender, you have a little more lovingness, you have a little more objectivity. If you're at least moving in the right direction, you've transformed enough to have a real understanding, then you start to see beyond that. Without a lot of effort, you start to see beyond that, and you kind of start to have a felt sense of what you said about 5 minutes ago, the miraculousness of everything. That starts to become very real for people. That starts to become not an idea and not a kind of attitude you adopt. You see the miraculousness of existence, and that is enough.
That is presence, right? That's where you see it, because existence is here now, but you can have an idea about it too. That's okay too, but I mean, if you really want to unfold it deeper.
To have the actual experience, to have that felt sense, that's because I think that's how it comes for most people, the actual experience of the miraculousness of life and the gratitude for it and the sense of the oneness and, the whole schmear. If any of that can come to you, and if you can see that it's real, if you can experience it without denying it, rejecting it, changing it into something else, then you've really come a long way. Then you've got a good chance of not being, fooled by a lot of things that were fooling you up until then.
To me, sometimes I like to make up an idea, a story about how these mechanisms work, and one is like in presence, and when you see the miraculousness and the, complexity, but I mean the interrelatedness of nature and of life in general, and even of our societies, everything. And really what drops away is like your knowing, and then your knowingness, all your thoughts just drop away, and then the felt sense rushes in, there it is. And you can have that too by contemplating concepts, like you can just say God is infinity, and then that infinity is a total concept. There's no such thing as infinity, there's vastness, let's say. But I mean, somehow when you say that word, infinity, then your knowing about it just kind of crashes out, and you can have a rush or a great feeling on that too. God is infinity, the vastness of it all. It's a miracle.
Absolutely. I like the way you put it. And the thing you're pointing out that's very important to me is that the conceptual part can be very important. And that people shouldn't, in Advaita circles, the mind and the conceptual part's often denigrated. The mind is the enemy and all that. But and there's points at which it's true, but there's also points at which the mind is the only way you're going to get there. And the conceptual understanding and the conceptual pondering and the getting your arms wrapped around the concept is going to be tremendously vital, necessary, and helpful. And I will disagree with you about the infinity part, that infinity is just a word. It's just a word until you've stepped into infinity for real. And
what's wrong with vastness? It has no boundaries.
Absolutely nothing. I have no semantic difficulties with anything.
Infinity just kind of means like take the biggest thing you can go and then keep going in space and time, and keep going forever in time and in space. So that's a space-time concept, infinity. But really, vastness with no boundaries is just now, eternity. I'm kind of fighting that one.
We're having a semantic argument.
I fight that one once in a while. Okay, but let's just, you hit me right on the head,
Let's say I use the word infinity to mean what you mean by the word vastness, and then we have no argument.
No argument. Okay. But I mean, you got me. You hit me right between the eyes, because that's my campaign. Because you said in Advaita, a lot of times words, thoughts, we can realize that they're limited to really express a reality. More what they do is they express the thought I had yesterday, and then I'm just kind of modulating it and mixing it up and trying to fit it to a new situation. And we can see that whole mechanism. But I mean, you're saying that things that are not expressed are not somehow realized often, And I'm saying that because of Advaita, kind of chewing on all this words and thoughts, that they become dismissed. And nobody really, these kind of Advaita teachers, they don't hone their words at all. They just give a hoot, They say the same damn thing and then those people that are transported by the feeling and the love and the open-heartedness and the vulnerability, and they're in the net. But the other ones are totally out, They're totally lost. And I don't know. I would like to work with people that didn't confuse language and think it was reality, but somehow thought that it had an important side.
I agree with you 100%. Language is a God-given gift. Language is wonderful. The ability to communicate and understand. And listen, you're always going to think in words. I mean, you have a felt sense of something, you can have powerful experiences, but when you talk to yourself, ultimately, you're going to say something, and it's going to be to yourself, and it's going to be words. Even when you're done with this body and you aren't here anymore, you're going to be working with your thought process. It's going to be words. I've been to the other side. And it's the same. You're still thinking. And
that's a great testimony. I'd like to hear more about that. And yeah, I would.
Well, that's pretty much all I can say, is that I noticed that in the bodiless state, in the after-death state, you still have concepts, and you still are, you're more pure awareness, but you are still having a conversation with yourself, because you're still noticing what you're aware of, and you're still interpreting it, and you're still saying, well, what's that? And I think that's that. And that's no different than what you and I are doing right now, and anybody who might be listening to this is doing right now. 1 second after you're dead, nothing much has changed except you're not on this earth. So, it's really true that anybody who wants to denigrate words, denigrate language, denigrate human communication is doing a great disservice. The mind and conceptual thinking and thinking at all are not the enemy. The enemy is thinking that they represent the entire reality. That's a misunderstanding. That's ignorance. But they certainly
there's a good part.
Divinely given.
There's a good part and a bad part. So the good part is they're making that major distinction, like reality, you're saying, is hugely vast, and then all our words and stuff, well, that's a small part of reality. And then I was saying, well, at least we have a lot of space to maneuver, right?
But they're part of the best that we've got, too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but just by making that distinction, right, and saying that, okay, well, the words, they're not real, or whatever they say, right away it kind of makes people think, well, then there's and this is a question that I want to ask you about, they think there is this thing, and you just said it a little while ago, called pure awareness, that we actually can abide in, and maybe for our whole life. Or wouldn't it be better to be in reality than it would be into these false words. And I mean, some people say there's a spaciousness and stuff like that, but they're not even functional. Nothing can happen. They don't even know how to pick up a phone anymore for those minutes. Or I've heard a lot of things, like, what is this pure awareness gig? And I mean, there must be something that goes before language, sure. But I mean, is that a real goal or a place that we're looking to get to, or is that something where a human can live?
It's the only thing I can say is to address that is it's where you'll find yourself more and more, or sooner or later. When everything else drops away, awareness is still going to be there. So that's my experience. There may be a point that I haven't experienced yet where there is no awareness, but why concern yourself with that? Because that's going to take care of itself if that's true. So, and I tend to believe it's true. I don't know it from experience, but I tend to believe it. So, but that's conjecture, and I don't do much conjecturing. When I talk to people, when we hold satsang, when I work with people, I only talk about what I know for sure. I don't bring my opinion into it. If I do, I say this is my opinion, or this is something I believe, which is very different from this I know for sure and can stake my life on it and can guarantee it to you. So, as far as awareness goes, we're talking about attention, and I can't help but to agree with, great masters from all the ages who've said that all we really have is our ability to focus our attention, and that's where we have to put our effort to focus our attention in the right place. And that when we die, when we're no longer in a body, we're just going to be attention. And whatever you've achieved in life in terms of being able to focus your attention, that's going to be what you take with you. And I have to say, that's been my personal experience. So you can never go wrong with that understanding that your attention is your most precious commodity. Is really, that's what you are. You are your attention. And
how about this? Say something about there's a wide attention and then there's a narrow or tightly focused attention. And so, I mean, is there a preference there, or is there anything to say about those two poles?
Not really, because nothing comes to mind, because I don't really look at it in those terms. I look at it more in the terms of is the attention. It's becoming more and more clear that where you have your attention is real rather than a diluted perception or a misperception. So, and again, everything I say in every area that I focus on is only because I'm working directly with individuals. So it comes out of a direct response to actual people, specific people. So, and what hits me again and again working with people is how we can fool ourselves, how we can totally delude ourselves, how ego leads us around by the nose, and we can have all kinds of wacky notions about what's really going on and where we're really at that have nothing to do with the reality of it. So all that's a preface to when you start talking to people about attention and awareness and these, understanding these conceptually, it gets very amorphous very quickly for people. And it has to start to be, when you work with people, it has to start to be an experiential rather than a conceptual understanding, because if you are your awareness, if you are your attention, then you have to experience that directly. And the more you can help people experience that directly, which is, of course is a in this moment thing, that's going to make a difference for people. Then they suddenly get it. Wait a minute, now I get it. I'm this consciousness now. I've worked with people, been in the consciousness movement for 30, 40 years and never really had a clear idea or an understanding of what the word consciousness means. And then they have an experience of clear, focused consciousness, and suddenly they understand something that for 40 years they weren't even trying to understand, and it changes the gestalt. It changes how they look at things.
Just to say another word about narrow focus and wide focus, because you could be curious, and then you kind of focus down on something. You could even look through a microscope and say, I wonder what this cell is doing. But a lot of times when you focus narrowly, you think something is needed here, and then that's kind of like from something is missing, and so then you think, oh, well, your mind anyhow his duty is to focus on it and kind of examine what could it possibly be missing and how could we fix it. So then, wide focus would seem like a more open and freedom, just checking everything out, and not really saying, oh, I need something here, I need there. But curiosity could do it.
Okay. So I would tend to call that, what you're calling narrow focus, I would tend to call that incorrect focus. And what you're calling wide focus, I would tend to call that focusing on what's real.
So you've said a lot of times reality, and so then maybe we ought to.
That's my word.
I know, man. We gotta somehow deconstruct that and put that, build a foundation under that. I think because people are going to run with that in all different directions and saying, "Oh my God, what is this reality he keeps talking about?"
It's a deal. It's a deal. So, they're all synonymous. You can say God, you can say truth, you can say reality, you can say realization, you can say presence. I mean, they're all synonyms for the one and the only, for that which is, the one. And everybody has their preference. I have a preference my preference is the word reality and the word God. I find myself interested, this is very interesting to me, using the word truth all the time because the audience seems to need it, because people seem to need that word. I use the word that feels like the right word at the moment, or even that I'm directed to use. But personally, when I was a seeker and not yet a finder, the word reality was my word. I said, give me reality. I don't care if it's, hell itself. If it's reality, that's what I want. And what I now know is that reality comes only on its own terms. That if you want to understand what's meant by the word reality, at least the way I use it, is you have to accept reality on its terms. It doesn't care about what you want. It doesn't care about your concepts. It doesn't care about your desires, and it doesn't care about how how you're viewing it. Reality stands in and of itself, by itself, and it's your job to get to it. It's your job to adapt to it on its terms, and it never bends. Reality, it's absolute. It's absolute, and once you accept the absoluteness of it, then it gets a little easier to not have the crazy notion that it has to conform to you, or that if it turns out to not be what you thought it was, then you'll just move on to something else. Because how do you move on to
There's
something
nothing else,
huh? There is nothing else, yeah.
So is reality ever changing, or is it never changing? Is it that is?
No, it's never changing.
So it's never like changing. The actual awareness itself. Oh yeah.
Yeah, how can it change? But our perceptions change, our experience changes. We're the changeable ones. Life is changeable, but reality isn't. Life and reality are not synonymous. Life happens within the context of reality. Reality, the way I'm using the word, the concept, is greater than life. Life, because there's also non-life. But reality is immovable and complete and total and one. I mean, I'm probably using reality in the sense that Advaitis used the term one or oneness. And it's just so obvious to me. It's so visible. I can sink my teeth into it. Anytime I use the word reality or think the word look at reality with some clarity, it's just so
much of the world is just like, okay, people say the only thing that doesn't change is change. It's always changing. So then what is that that's changing? That's the illusion, right? Or that is our interpretation, or that what it does seem that we breathe in and then we breathe out. The birds have chicks and eggs and hatch them, and then they move south for the winter. I mean, it seems like with or without human beings in their story, things are moving, aren't they? Or
absolutely, that doesn't have to be questioned. There's no question that you're correct about in that statement. There's no question that that's all going on, and all of that is happening as part of reality. Reality is big enough. Reality is vast enough. Reality is real enough. Reality is true enough. Reality is divine enough that everything can easily be included and accommodated. There doesn't have to be any any conflict in people's minds or any idea of conflict that, well, but if everything is changing and impermanent, well, how can there be an idea of something as permanent and unchanging? None of that's in conflict. It's all true as far as reality, because reality is all inclusive.
But you're saying reality is changeless,
is.
reality is changeless, but those changes must not be real then, right? Or, I mean, people say that because a lot of people say nothing exists, nothing ever happened and stuff like that. I don't know where they say it from, but
I say that because I see it, because it's true, because it's actual. Nothing has ever happened. You don't exist, I don't exist, none of it. None of it. But it's all going on. I like the Buddhist way of saying it. It's all a co-arising. And none of it is conflictual to say that there's a permanent, abiding, non-changing, and at the same breath say, and everything changes, and everything is moving, and everything is evolving, and life is movement itself. None of that is a contradiction if you are in any way, if you've had even 1 second of going beyond the mind. The mind can't reconcile that without calling it a contradiction. But beyond the mind, there's no problem. And reality is not just what happens in the mind. Reality is way bigger. So it's not so much that we have to explain how it's not a contradiction as much as we have to challenge and encourage people to get to the point where they can see and experience how it's not a contradiction. Then there's no argument. Then there's no confusion about it.
I didn't get it exactly if you said life is movement or life has movement.
Is movement.
Life is movement. So then I used to think that, oh yeah, all that movement, which is life, is a convenience for other life, because if things weren't moving, at least that part of our mind that only recognizes the contrasts wouldn't see anything. It would be numb to all that. It wouldn't be the kind of the fish in the water story, like they don't know there's anything like water. Where's all this water, And so then where's all this life if nothing is moving, right? I mean, so then the river of life somehow is like the necessary ingredient for at least the mental apparatus to realize that it exists.
But everything is moving, and everything does exist, and everything is real, and it's all within the context of the greater reality, and the greater reality is unitary. The greater reality can't be understood or felt or in any way really grasped by a dualistic discussion or a dualistic concept. So until you have some personal experience of that which is beyond the dual, it's going to seem like a contradiction. It's going to seem like there's an inherent conflict when you talk about the unchanging reality and yet the constant movement of life. But there's actually no contradiction.
No, I smell something like that, I smell the truth to that, because like when people say paradox, something in me realizes that's only from the dual language. Of course, I say this way and I say that way, and that looks like a paradox, but without that language and before that language, it's just what it is. It is. That's all. And so paradox never makes me challenges me very much. I just say, just relax and stop thinking, and that's solved.
Wonderful, wonderful. I would encourage you to throw yourself more into that whenever that feeling comes. And then it gets a little scary too, because it's kind of, people experience it as the abyss, but it's very rich, and it takes you, if you can get past the anxiety, it takes you to amazing understanding.
I wonder what I do, like sometimes I think I dismiss anxiety because I'm just so certain that I've done it so long and that it's been totally useless, that I just certain that it's counterproductive in every way, and that the whole world is really running on it, and all the decisions, what do I say? Call to actions are all anxiety based, at least in the international level, surely in the business level. Probably on my family level, in my community. We always go to the hottest fire first, right? And it's just, in other words, if we want any action and want to get people to do something, we try to convince them that our fire is hotter than yours. And we have the urgency over here. And so then something is awry with that, And that's where, the Einstein quote of you can't get anything to change by using the same... I would call it the same anxiety ratio,
So that's not really the anxiety that I was alluding to. I was more talking about the existential anxiety. There's a built-in anxiety and terror that's part and parcel of recognizing and noticing that you're alive. Being alive is a fearsome process, a fearsome condition to find yourself in because you're so vulnerable. We're all so vulnerable, and life itself is vulnerable. You could almost say that's the definition of life, vulnerability. So once an individual starts to recognize that and feels the need to face that, which is the right direction, that becomes quite challenging. The terror of that and the fear of that and the anxiety of that and the feeling of standing at the edge of the abyss, that's the existential dilemma. That's the dark night of the soul people talk about. So sooner or later, that existential anxiety, that existential terror has to be faced. Otherwise, you can't really sink your teeth into what's really going on. Then you're still always trying to step back a little from reality because it's so fearsome. So that fear, sooner or later, and hopefully it happens before the last 30 seconds of life, that fear has to be faced. There's no way around it. And that's usually what people are trying to avoid. That's all the distractions and all the TVs going and people trying to distract themselves in any and every way possible. But in a moment of quiet, in a period of silence, when you have to face yourself, it's that existential terror, that existential anxiety that's going to come up. And that's where it's going to take everything in you to really move through that and see what's on the other side.
Apparently that can come before and after, because in one way we're talking about practices and approaching, and then you approach and you get to this thing and look down and, oh my God, maybe I can do it tomorrow, But the other one is like you, because you said bolt of lightning hit you, and then like you didn't have a chance not to be hit by a bolt of lightning because it just happened to happen.
Oh no, but I spent 2 years fighting it. But I still spent 2 years.
No, that's what I'm saying. It comes after. If it didn't come before, it'll come after. Don't worry.
That's right. That's right.
On both sides, maybe,
That's right. See, the order doesn't matter, just the reality. Just if it's real. And nobody gets a pass. You'll have to deal with, all aspects have to be dealt with, whether they're dealt with before, after, the order is not the essence of it. The essence of it is certain things are essential, certain understandings and realizations that can't be bypassed. And it's not about what order they happen in or what causes them or how you got there, but the question is it real? Did it really happen? Did you really get to this point? And there's a lawfulness to that, an orderliness to that's where the spiritual master is vital, because you're not going to know that on your own. It may be divinely given. You may have some sense. You may, through grace, have some understanding of that, but you're not in an objective position to help yourself. There's going to be moments where you need objective, meaning outside help. I certainly did. Let me put it that way.
A question comes up, and maybe I got the answer too, but I mean, the question is kind of like so many reports of people that, have awakened, let's just say it that way, be broad and bold, say that it was some kind of a sudden happening, and it was my mind, the top of my mind blew off, or whatever happened was like this sudden thing. And then somehow they go into, it's something you can't teach. But then they're teaching something, see? And I suppose, and if I'm kind of curious about that, but I guess I know your answer, because you said once before something about you got to build a foundation, or you got to build a, so you got to do the work, whatever that is, so that you could be undone later, or I don't know what, Some people have not done any work, probably. Wasn't just Eckhart Tolle just kind of really depressed, but he wasn't really, was he a spiritual student or not? I don't think he was doing any meditation.
I don't think he was.
So then it's not always a jab. Of course, then the masters always say, well, in his last lifetime he did a lot of work, and they get their 2 bits in there anyhow, right?
Well, who's to say? Who's to say? I don't know.
So how do you know what to teach, Okay, your teacher taught something. And maybe you just say, and somehow that was my foundation, so I'll just teach that foundation.
I don't teach anything. I work with people, but I can't deny there's a teaching, because out of that working with people, and when you meet with people in groups, I'm still working with the individual, but things happen in groups. We get together as a group. So out of the discussion, out of those dialogues, I'd be a liar if I said I didn't notice that a teaching is there. But the point is not the teaching. The point is working with people for transformation, for truth. And out of that, certain thing. I mean, I've watched my own videos and listened to my own audios, and I'm just blown away by the consistency. I would have expected, I would have predicted that there's no consistency, because I listen to myself talk publicly, and I don't hear any consistency. But when I listen to recordings or watch videos, I'm just amazed how consistent it is. I'm very impressed by the consistency. I'm not trying to be consistent, but there is a consistency. So I'd be the first to admit that there is a consistent message, there is a consistent teaching, but I'm not trying to deliver that. That's just comes out of speaking with people.
Well, I noticed that too, because I'm an onlooker in a way. I've spoken with 150 people, and maybe listened to some more. I'm not an avid listener. I somehow like to do it more than I like to listen to somebody else, But I guess I've explained it in another way, not that there's a consistent teaching, but that all of us have tendencies, and those tendencies, wherever they come from, somewhere in the collective consciousness or in the part of mind that we're not noticing at this moment, or somehow, our favorite explanations come up, and until they don't, they do. I don't know. I mean, I just think we're all people, and no matter how clear we are, that's just my explanation.
I've learned more from being a public speaker, a public spiritual teacher, maybe than from anything, because I've learned more from listening to myself speak and being surprised at what has come out of my mouth, and it's clarified for me things I didn't even know were in there. So I'm one of my best students, actually.
I'm always saying that in dialogue, we discover. And especially if we don't have a lot of expectations, because you were saying like a lot of people are kind of sucking the word truth out of you. They want that word, and so you're giving it to them. Say, okay, you want truth? Here, have it.
No, I'm not doing that.
The word, I mean, just the word, use the use of the word.
But they're eliciting it. It's valid. It's not something they want and I give it. It's the right word for them. So that's the word that gets put in.
Well, that's what I mean. Also, the right word for them. But for some years I was thinking like, how could you broaden this teaching? Because it's really a teaching of freedom, And then I thought, well, somehow you have to broaden the language, but you just can't make it up. So then I thought, okay, you need a new venue, because if you keep going to people that have the same expectations like spiritual philosophy and Eastern philosophy and stuff like that, and whatever their background is, they want to hear kind of those concepts, if they want to hear karma, rebirth, or,
well, that's too bad, because they need reality, and
but I mean, we're not trying to change reality, but we're trying to phrase it in a way that they can receive, right? And so then I was saying, if we go to homeless,
I'm not trying to. You may be trying to. I'm not.
Well, I'm trying to broaden it. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't seem It doesn't seem really that broad for the vast chunk of humanity. Like there's billions of people, but there's not billions of seekers.
I think that's valuable and valid, and I would applaud that work. But that's not my work.
No, right. I told you that was. I'm preparing them. I'm going to send them to you a little bit more clean.
All right. I love that. Great. No, I think that's very important. You have to reach people, and there are people who are going to be the ones who figure that out. And if you're one of those ones, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
But that's not that. I'm not the kind of guy for that. I wouldn't be good at that.
No, but I mean, you're really good at talking to individuals, and I really applaud that, because right away you're saying that what's good for me is not good for everyone else. And so then what's good for me is good for everyone else is fundamentalism, right? And so you're saying, like, I'm not a fundamentalist whatsoever, I'm trying to look at each case as an individual case and apply what my sense is that, what grace gives me for that person. And that's really very commendable and beautiful way to relate.
Well, it's a joy. It's a joy and a privilege, and it's also just annoying as hell.
Oh yeah,
because people fight you all the nail. All the resistance is always what you're dealing with.
Yeah, you just don't have to give it any juice, you know, because if you give resistance juice, aren't you strengthening it in a way? Because I mean, even in our
No,
own life.
you can't get me with your resistance. Sorry, but I have to work with it. I'm obligated. It's my duty to work with it because that's the person's challenge is to get past that resistance so actually something can happen for them. So I have to work with it. I don't have a choice, but I don't have to, I have the right to be annoyed, but I can't get perturbed because I have to still work with it. So
in a way, the resistance is who we think we are, right?
Buttons.
The resistance is who we think we are. You know, this is my limitations, or who I think I am. You know, that's my self-definition, or what you could call ego. You know, the bundle of thoughts that says this is as far as I can go. And hey, and you know, I mean, these resistances, I guess we developed them over the years. They're kind of friends.
The resistance is always ego trying to survive, is the way I would say it in response in this discussion. It's just the ego trying to survive. It's the ego trying to fight back. It's the ego trying to hold on. And, the master-disciple game is a very simple battle. It's the master is in mortal combat with your ego. If the master wins, you win. And if you win, then your ego wins and you lose.
So in a way, the ego's not personal either, right? Because I mean, people talk about constellation work and family work and generational work and cultural conditioning. So then, if you
it has all those dimensions. It has all those dimensions.
You realize it's not even me, you know. So then, what are you hanging on to?
Well,
it
if
for?
you've realized it's not even you, you're well on the way.
It's just a rag. It's a rag I kind of hold in front of my genitals, you know.
Then you're well on the way from having got beyond, from truly being beyond the ego. Then you're already out of its clutches. You may not have thrown it to the ground, but you're out of its clutches if you can say that. And most people are not even close to that. The ego still has them by the throat. So anyone who can say what you just said, very, very advanced position.
Well, we threw it on the table, you know, everybody can examine it, you know, and then we suggest, okay, you know, what's happening to this Miller dude doesn't matter at all, you know, just look at your own life, but it's on the table and just see how important are these things, and then go back to that softening thing, because if we tell them to shuck it down, they're not going to chuck it down, right? So we start to say soften it and see if you're still surviving, you know, see if everything cracks apart or if it seems to be okay.
Yeah, well, that's what you're really saying is it's all experiential. That the nub of it, what's significant is whether you're really experiencing it for yourself. When you say throw it on the table, you're really suggesting experience it for yourself. It's not enough to get it as an idea. It may start there and it may be very valuable, but unless you have some real living experience yourself, it's not gonna change much. It's not gonna give you anything or benefit you. So you have to, we all have to wrestle with the ego until we win.
Yeah, it even might be valuable to say that 99% of the time it starts as an idea. So then take it as an idea because that's the only thing I can deliver you, you know. I mean, yeah. I could try to deliver you a good feeling and stuff, but that doesn't depend on me very much. And so then...
Well, that's why I'm not against ideas by any means.
Right.
That's why conceptual discussions are absolutely necessary at different points. And for some people, they're not going to get much beyond that for now. And that's fine. That's fine. You know, every point along the path is valid. You know, there isn't like you're not at the valid point yet. I mean, come on. Let's relax a little bit and realize that everybody goes at their own pace and everybody has their own understanding and everybody is going in the same direction. Just because you're 5 miles down the road, you're not any better than the guy who's 5 miles back. He'll catch up to you. Don't give him some time.
Yeah. So then that's just tolerance and respect, you know, respecting everybody. And then somehow when we really feel that connection that, you know, is even beyond connection, because connection already says that we're two, trying to hook up somehow with frequencies or something, you know. But
it's also realizing that somebody else is 5 miles ahead of you, so don't let your ego get too big.
Well, I mean, mentoring is a great thing, in which you're doing, and I'm trying to do it in my little way, but just not so much personally, but just by facilitating.
Well, anything that helps people move forward toward what's real, I'm for it. And anything that keeps people mired in what doesn't really ultimately matter much, I'm against it.
Wonderful. What a pleasure to speak with you, and what a lot of clarity. I don't know. I hope I wasn't too contorted in my ideas, but somehow, and I hope I wasn't just searching for verification, but somehow I was open to receive.
Well, what I would say to you, Richard, what I'd say to you is you're a total sweetheart and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Premodaya.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Say hello to everyone in the Bodhi Center, and hopefully we can meet again. And who knows?
I would love it. I would love it. Thank you.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Premodaya, and thank you everybody for coming and watching our little discussion. And we'll show you how to link up with Premodaya and see what he's doing, and see what all the great things that's happening in the Bodhi Center. So thank you, and everything depends on you, because well, you're the name of the game. Okay. Thanks so much.